Nature teaches us that things take time and great things usually takes longer.
Welcome to Founders Voyage, the weekly community Discord live discussion. Today, we are honored to have Carlos Javier Chacón Sánchez as our guest. It's been our pleasure to coordinate these weekly discussions since April 2020, and we're delighted that this has become a cooperative learning experience that continues to connect our growing community in meaningful conversation around topics that are relevant to all of us personally and professionally.
Thanks, Spencer. It's been a pleasure to be here as a co-host today. I'm not usually here, so it's really special for me. And it's also great to have a guest like Carlos. It's a pleasure for us as an active member of the community and a member of the team as well. So it's awesome to have Carlos here.
Thank you so much, guys, for having me. And well, I would like to start kind of introducing myself for those of you who don't know me. I am from Venezuela, so my native language is Spanish, and I've been learning English since I was 6 years old. I am now 30, so it's been some years already, And the reason why I learned English, it was because my mom forced me to do so, When I was 6 years old, she isn't fluent in English, but she knows the importance or how important it is to learn a new language, to speak, to be able to communicate with someone else in a different language than Spanish, It was very, very funny because now I am teaching it, and that's how can I can start teaching my classes, I try to let my students know how I began my journey with English and for motivating them,
Absolutely. Now, Carlos, we've obviously talked with you a couple of times, and it is always a pleasure. But I was hoping you could give us a bit of background about what you've been doing lately, how the farm's going, how teaching's going in a general sense, and how you are.
I've been teaching English as a second language for teenagers. They are from about 9 to 16 years old. And those are courses offered to the public. I teach at a university, but those are courses that they offer and everyone can enroll if they want to. And I also have been raising chickens on the farm that we own. And that's a very interesting story as well because it began in 2003. We bought that farm. And at the very beginning, it was a hobby, We did it because we wanted to have a hobby. Since the pandemic, we noticed that those or that kind of hobbies are quite expensive, to afford. So since then, we are trying to become it a profitable family business, And of course, there are a lot of challenges as a family business itself, And we are going through that. That's basically what I have been doing. But of course, if I should make it a percentage, I would say I am teaching English 50% and on the farm 50% as well of my time,
How do you feel, man? I mean, you're teaching English in Venezuela, right? So I come from Brazil, so we have similar situations that we have like in politics and economy wise. And when I was younger, I had a lot of contact with English early age, and it made a lot of difference for me as a Brazilian, especially because it gave me access to so much. And I think you may feel the same because we probably wouldn't ever have this conversation now if it wasn't for the language, right? So it's just one of the things. Of course, you have access to many other things like better education, more information, if you want to learn a new skill. So how do you feel when you are teaching the English language for teenagers, do you feel there's hope for them for a better future? How do you feel like in your heart when you're doing this job? It is fulfilling as I think it is. How do you feel about it?
It sure is. Even let me tell you, like, I love to work outdoors, to farm, to sow, to plant. In my head, I think I am sowing seeds every time I teach English. And of course, sometimes those seeds I have been able to see how it grows. And let me tell you, if you would have asked me when I was studying high school, will you teach teenagers? I would have said, no way, that's impossible. And this time, I have been teaching teenagers for about 4 years in a row. In some cases, at the office where I work, they tell me, like, hey, teacher, will you take adults courses? And I say, no, I want to teach teenagers. And why? Because that's one of the tools I have found for improving my country. When I say that, you all know Venezuela has been dealing with a lot of challenges in politics, economics. One of the things that gets my attention is when a student they tell me, like, hey teacher, I learn English because I want to move abroad. Of course, I want to move abroad. It is a very polite way to say how they used to tell me that. It always gets my attention, because if someone who is probably 20, 22 years old and thinks about moving abroad, that's fine. But if a children or a boy, a girl says that, I know there is a lot behind, the family, what they listen at home, what they see, their expectation from their parents. I know that there is a lot behind. But in fact, or indeed, I really enjoy teaching teenagers, and it's very funny, because when I am teaching, I used to change my voice. For example, English or most of English speakers have a very particular accent, in Spanish. So I start, hey, my name is Cato Javier, blah, blah, blah. And when I'm going to speak in Spanish, I try to sound as if I was a native English speaker. They say, like, what's going on? You aren't from here? And I used to say, tell them, like, hey, I do this because we are learning English. So we are supposed to sound as native as possible. And of course, the most important thing is to be fluent enough and to be able to communicate with anyone who doesn't speak Spanish, which is our native language.
Absolutely. I think something that's super interesting is how you would have thought you wouldn't want to teach teenagers, but going through the experience, you really engaged with them. You found it an enjoyable experience. It's something that you look forward to. I do wonder how many opportunities entrepreneurs find that they're trying out something and they think maybe they won't enjoy it, and then they, give it a go and really tend to enjoy it. So I think that's a really powerful aspect of what you're doing. But I'd like to understand a little bit deeper, what opportunities or value do you think learning English opens up for these kids? Is it about moving away, or is it about communicating with people who are from America and other countries nearby and bringing value back into Venezuela? What's your perspective?
Okay, well, that's a very personal, and it might change on everyone. But for example, for me, English has been extremely important. If I wouldn't speak English, I wouldn't have been able to attend the MIT, to go to the High Chaparral reunion, to speak and to have this talk today. Yep. And for my students, I see that like a long-term goal because there are a lot of possibilities. Of course, in some cases, some students tell me, like, "Hey, teacher, I am here because I want to learn English and I want to understand a video game." That's fine. That's great. Other students used to tell me, hey, I'm here because I want to work, I don't know, and they mention a company from outside of Venezuela, and that's fine. But honestly, in my case, I think English, it is a very important tool for anyone. We say, or I say English because that's the language I teach, you know. But you can say German, French, Russian, any other language, you know, because it really expands our borders, you know. In the case of English, everyone knows English, or at least most of people knows English, because that's a very different part, or that's a bit different in Latin America. Not everyone is fluent enough in English. That's something I would love to see. I mean, I would love to see that we all in Latin America were fluent enough in English, at least to communicate, to have a small conversation. But sadly, it is not the case, at least not in Venezuela. I have no idea if Brazil is different, but I think we all are the same, you know? So even we have English since kindergarten, and we have English at school and high school and at the university as well. But I have no idea what happens, why we are not fluent enough in English when we get our high school diploma or our major diploma, you know, or
Well, it's good that you mentioned Brazil because what I feel, oh my God, most people don't know English at all here. They have it at school, and it's terrible. Unfortunately, I don't know if it's the way it's teach. I mean, the focus is on the language. At least when I was a student, so it sucked because you will be studying the same thing over and over every year, and it's terrible. From my perspective, that's the problem. But now we have a different approach now. It's been like probably like 5 years that we have this approach of bilingual schools. So you actually have like history classes or math classes in English. And I think in the future we will be better, but it's like a new thing here in Brazil as well. So it's trending. Many schools are starting to use that, but yeah, that's the best way to learn. You know, I mean, if you put it to practice, it's better than just focus on the language. So if you have a goal in mind, it's much easier. My goal was probably like beating a video game and learning how to program. So that's why my English is so good. But if I look at my peers, most of them, they don't speak English, even if they study it in the same schools and also did external English classes, it's still not enough to be fluent. So that's truly a problem here in Latin America, especially in Brazil is worse because we're such a huge country that a lot of people don't focus on learning English because it's not that necessary for you to land a job or something because you're probably going to be speaking Portuguese anyways. So I feel that when you mentioned the objectives of the students, if they're still teenagers, they're still figuring out what they want to do with their lives, what they want to work with, and what they want to learn. So I guess that this will all change. But one of the things that I feel is that English it will be important in any decision they make in the future because is if they want to learn a skill or if they want to study any field, they will have research from universities all around the world that are written in English, right? So even from universities from Brazil, we're going to have articles written in English. So that opens a broad spectrum of different skills and different places that you can be. From this particular point, have you ever personally changed? I mean, as you're teaching English now, it's probably a new thing, a thing that you didn't think of when you were studying and working with different things with engineering. And, you know, how do you feel that that's changed your history and that's changed what you was supposed to do, what you thought you would be doing now, and what you're doing now, actually? So, how do you feel about it? How did it change your path?
English for me has been literally a blessing, and I feel extremely grateful. because otherwise, like I told you before, I wouldn't have done many things that I have already done now, without English. And the goal, it is extremely important. Why? Because in some cases, some parents used to tell to their children, like, hey, you should learn English or any other topic because you probably need it when you are 30, 40 years old, and they are just 6 or 10 or 11 years old. It sounds for them extremely far, extremely remote, weird, like far away. And it doesn't work. Of course, even with my experience, my mom used to tell me something like that in Spanish. And I used to reply to her, like, hey, mom, why should I learn English if we all speak Spanish? And she told me, like, hey, probably you might need it when you work. You will be able to talk to people from different countries and so on. And what's the difference with my mom and other parents? That my mom never gave up on me, and she kept forcing me until I was fluent, I until I have the basics of English in my head, Once she noticed that, she said, like, okay, Carlos Javier, if you want to study English, that's your own decision, but that's up to you, you know. And then I met some exchange students from the US, Germany, Poland, and it was the very first moment when I see the importance of knowing English in this case, And that's why I used to tell my students that it is extremely important to find their goals. And that goal could be to be able to understand a video game or to be able to understand a reel on Instagram or anything, or the lyrics of a song, and that's fine. Because that way, it is like easier to be fluent enough in English instead of, hey, for example, I love to outdoors, to farm, to read about farming, and I love that. If you if you give me a book about fiction, I will say, oh, thank you so much. I do appreciate it. But probably I won't read it, or I will read just 2 or 3 pages. But if you give me a book about farming, botanic, or anything like that, I will even kiss you, in order to say thank you so much. Because of course those are my topics, those are my interests.
Absolutely. I think the impact that your parents, your mum in this case, can have on your life is so incredible. Her being willing to push you to begin with, but also open up the option to you to learn and continue or not on learning English, I think is a really powerful way of teaching.
Hi there. If you're enjoying this podcast, would you mind leaving us a review, a like, and subscribe on your favorite podcast platform? Thanks so much. That really helps our reach. The Founders Voyage podcast is now proudly sponsored by VidOps. Kane at VidOps has been taking care of our editing since early 2024. He works efficiently, and I'm sure you'll agree that he does a great job. Thank you to VidOps for helping bring this podcast to life. If you want the same great support we're getting for your podcast, or you need help with video, photography, or animation, you can get 10% off at vidops.io using our referral code VOYAGE. That's vidops.io, referral code VOYAGE. Now back to the show.
I know previously you and I have talked about the importance of letting people make mistakes when learning. And that's something that you feel quite strongly about. And I'd love you to give us a bit of a deep dive into your philosophy about making mistakes during education and how they're important and what, as a teacher, you do to encourage your students for it.
Yeah, absolutely. Let me tell you or what I do every first day of class. I used to read them, to ask their names, their age, and why they are here. And why do I ask their age or their names? Because I really enjoy or I really want to call them by their names. I don't like to mention or to talk about a student like, hey, you, the one who's wearing a cap, or, I prefer to call them by their names. Their age, why? Because sometimes I have students who are 9 years old and who are 16 years old as well. And the approach teaching, it is different, and we have, or they are in the same class. And why they are here? Because I want to know what is their reason. And among the rules, I used to tell them, like, hey, mistakes are fully allowed. And in both sides, I can make a mistake, they can as well. Where would that warning show up, or that red flag will show up? When we do something wrong more than 3 times. And that's like, hey, what's going on? Something else is happening. It could be something they do or something I did. But mistakes are fully allowed, at least in my class. And why? I'm not sure how things are in other places, but at least here in Venezuela, when you see a teacher or a professor, you kind of see a god or something or someone very perfect. And I don't like it. Because for me, mistakes are opportunities or are learning opportunities. And we should remember, or we should keep in mind, that the learning process as a process takes time and is unique for everyone. Because that's a different story, or it uses to happen when you have, I don't know, probably triplets, or when you have twins, or when you have cousins or nephews, and you try to compare each other. That's wrong. Because every person is unique. Like I told you, I really enjoy to learn or to read about farming, about agriculture. But probably Spencer loves to read about robotics. And that's fine, If Spencer gives me a book about robotics, I will say, hey, thank you, I do appreciate it. But if it doesn't have anything related to farming, probably I will just read 3 or 4 pages, and that's it. And that's fine, that's okay, no problem. So that's, in some cases, from my experience, is when most or some courses don't achieve or doesn't achieve their goal, And let me talk about grades. Grades are important, but those are just numbers. Probably in a different topic, in a undergraduate studies, that might be different. But when we're talking about teaching teenagers, grades are just numbers. And from my own experience, sometimes one day when I was having a math test, I had studied a lot, for days, for weeks. And when I got the paper on my hand, I got kind of a panic attack, and I forgot everything. So would that mean that I didn't study enough? Of course I did. That's why, for me, grades are just numbers. Of course, they are important and blah, blah, blah. But it isn't, or those aren't the goals, the main goal. It isn't the main goal.
There are so many things about your answer that I love. That is some things that I apply. I don't have students. I have people that work with me, and especially the trainees. They're there to learn, right? So I apply a thing that is called helplessness. When someone comes with a question for me, and I say, okay, so what is the answer? Because sometimes people there see you as you said, like the teachers, the instructors, sometimes they're seen as demigods or something like this. They feel that they're perfect. But a matter of fact, when you're a boss, it doesn't mean you're perfect. So what I say to them is like, okay, you came with the question, but the next time you came with the answer. And if you have more than an answer, you came with both, and tell me what's the best option in your opinion, and I help you to decide. I have people being grateful for that even years after they left my company and went to work at a different company. They come to me saying, hey man, you teach me something most of the people don't know. I've been standing out in my job now because of that. Although it sounds like it's terrible to think about how not helping trainee in the way of helplessness, but actually it's good for them because they learn to figure out, and that's the best thing you can teach as a structure, as a boss, as a leader, or any way you might think of it. And I love that your answer had a lot to do with that. It's amazing to see that it works as well for you. And what I was thinking about it, what was the thing? It could be in farming, it could be in teaching, it could be anywhere in your life as an entrepreneur, as a farmer. Or when did you feel that you were helpless, and how did you overcome that? And made your way out of it. And what was like a real challenge for you in that sense? It would be nice to hear about what you had.
It was during the pandemic, basically, where we all stayed home and had no idea what's going on. In Venezuela, a lot of people dying, close ones, people we knew, people we knew. And it was very chaotic. In fact, at that time, I was no longer teaching English because I started in 2016. I was teaching English for 2 years, and I stopped for about 2 years again. And it was in 2021 when they called me back. So what drove me to keep going? It was looking at the result. And even during the pandemic, it was the year when we noticed that the farm can no longer be a hobby and we couldn't afford that. And we, since then, are trying, my mom, my father, and I, to become it a profitable family business. Of course, we are still working hard on it. There are many challenges, there are many details on that. We are doing it. And basically, those emotions and those feelings are very important because I wouldn't change anything what I have lived since then or since I was born, because otherwise I wouldn't be where I am now. And of course, it doesn't mean that I am at the top of the hill, not at all. But I think I am climbing. To where? I have no idea where. Just time will tell.
I think we can all agree on that, right, Carlos? Because I guess the pandemic was so harsh on everybody, and we feel like we survived that. And as a business owner, it was really hard. I work with something that is innovation, and it's the first thing they cut off. It's that. So it was really hard for us as well, and I think for anyone, anywhere. And it's good to hear that you feel like, okay, I'm not on the top. We passed that, and it's fine now. And I feel a lot of hope on everyone now. And we don't believe that it happened, right? When you think about it, it was like, oh, that was so weird. It was so out of place. I think sometimes we can be glad that some things changed, and that's how I feel. And it's interesting to hear your perspective on it as well. So thanks for the answer.
If you wonder about what changed on me, and I'm grateful for it, it's my perspective. I am not the same Carlos Javier than I was during the pandemic or before the pandemic. It has changed. In terms of that, I really appreciate more the details. You may wonder, okay, what details? Like when I receive a message from a friend and saying, hey, Carlos, even Daniel, what you did some weeks ago, that checking in message, I do appreciate it much more than before. When I get to spend the afternoon with my godson, when I get to talk to you, even online, I do appreciate it more than before. Because I think we tend to make things granted, or we try to think that everything is granted, and nothing is granted. Even life isn't granted at all. But of course, it doesn't mean that you should be living with fear or nervous or no, just trying to enjoy every day. And I know I can say it very easily, but it isn't at all.
Just so I can pass the word for Spencer, I just wanted to complete with information that but people listening here, they won't know. But you know that I moved to the farm for 3 years during the pandemic, and that totally changed my life forever. I was like a crazy businessman that just thought about money and making big and working for big corporations like big cities, New York, like those weird. I see as weird now because nature is so awesome to have. I used to have a lot of chickens here, and it was so cool. It was like the best thing. It's to see they grow and to it's something that if you never experienced, I thought it was like it's weird. It's a lot of work, but it's rewarding because the results are amazing when you're like eating a fruit that you bought from the seeds, and it's amazing. It's incredible. So I feel that the pandemic was really important for me because I started valuing more life. I was kind of depressed in 2019 because we had some political problems, and the economy was not that good. But now it doesn't matter anymore, like I'm doing well with my business, but that's not my focus anymore. I was like, I am focused more in living life and living a better life than actually like showing off that I'm doing good or something, when we are, it's different because maybe you're hearing this conversation and you are from a developed country. So it's different because here in Brazil, and I think most of Latin America and most of developing countries, when you're from lower middle class or when you're poor, you get a little bit better in life. You want to show off because that's what people do here. That's because, that's a lot of inequality and stuff. And I might feel that I travel a lot around Latin America, and I feel like that's most how it is here. Even like in my experience, United States, I see that Latin people, they value like brand clothes more than people that are native or they're born in America. So it's not important, and it made me see life in a different perspective, and it was awesome. So I feel now that I really want to do this stuff. I really want to be an inspiring businessman or wherever, but it's not the same. It's different values, it's different pace. And as you said, I feel like this here now, it's so much more. We're doing this podcast, and I feel so much more rewarding if we're doing for free. It's not profit, let's say, oriented. It's non-profit, right? So, but still, it's so valuable because this was important in the pandemic for me. This community here. So I think that's one of the things that happened. And after the pandemic is over, it's a gift for us, right? So I feel really blessed.
It sure is. And let me tell you, Daniel, that the most important therapist and the wisest is nature. And even let me tell you my experience with I used to grow some herbs on the farm, and I don't apply pesticides and fertilizers. Okay, so I was sowing corn. I was taking pictures. There was a corn, for those who don't know, uses to take about 3 or 4 months to harvest. So I was sowing that. I was taking care of the plants. There was only about a month and a half left before harvesting. Yeah, the plants were very tall. And suddenly, one afternoon, some cows got into that piece of land. And what I have worked for probably 2 months, they damaged that in about 15 minutes, 20 minutes, something like that. What I did, of course, I was very angry because I wasn't on the farm. The people we worked with, probably they were busy. I have no idea what happened exactly. But then, okay, I felt that feeling, that anger, and then I had to start all over again. And now, what I do it is I try to sow rosemary, which it is a plant that calf and cattle don't eat. So if they will jump in again, nothing else will happen. Okay, so it's like nature teaches us that things take time, and great things usually takes longer.
Absolutely. I think so many people, just like Daniel said, went through during the COVID pandemic the experience of like living. Previously they lived a life with certain priorities, and then they had this shift that forced them to reevaluate and understand the importance of different things. And so many people I've talked to said since the pandemic how important it is for them now to get some time in nature, be able to like sort of get a bit more of a work-life balance sort of situation. And I think that's really, really great. I think it's had a very positive impact, obviously very negative impact in a lot of ways, but on some people's lives by being forced to reevaluate. Now, Carlos, we've talked quite a bit about what you've been doing and what you've done in the past. Can you give us an idea of, in your ideal world, what you see as sort of the next 5 years for you, where you think you'll be going, what you think you'll be working on?
Spencer, I have no idea. Really, I have no idea what I will be doing in 2 or 3 years. Probably I might be teaching English. I will be teaching English, enjoying what I do, of course, on the farm. If nothing extremely serious happens, I will be in Venezuela. You know, of course, probably traveling to some countries or anything, but I will be in Venezuela because that's where I was born, and this territory is a wonderful place. And I don't say I am not the only one who says that. I know a lot of people who are from Germany, from the US, and have been here, and they love our country. Is beautiful.
Hey, Carlos. I never been in Venezuela, but I know it's an amazing country, and I hope everything political wise be solved soon because everyone in the world is seeing all the challenges you guys are having, and we have it here as well. I can relate to that. And the feeling that you have now, before the pandemic, I really wanted to move from Brazil. Probably, I'm not sure where I would be. Maybe in Australia, maybe in the United States or somewhere in Europe. Because I thought like working with technology on the level I am now, I should be working on a bigger company from outside Brazil. But as you said, this is where we were born and where our family is. So this is important. And more than ever, I feel that after the pandemic, I don't feel like leaving because I can work from here as well. If I think about it, like with after the pandemic, it's so much easier to have a work from home, a job. And I see that there's a lot of opportunities in developing economies that are unseen, and you can find them as you found with language teaching, as I found with different things here. It's a feeling that I share with you, and I just wanted to note this. If you ever want to come to Brazil, let me know, and we can plan something.
Absolutely. Even sometimes a lot of people from Venezuela have moved abroad. Sometimes they say like, "Hey, I am in the US or in Germany helping my relatives who stay in Venezuela," and that's fine. But in some cases, money isn't what a person needs. Most of people needs presence. Of course, I don't pretend to judge anyone because that's a very personal decision. And if I know that some people have say, hey, if you stay here, I'm going to kill you. And of course, you have to leave. You must leave. That's it. There is nothing else. Okay. But that's a very personal decision, and I respect that. But what I see on the streets, it is that our population is seniors, or is aging. And in most cases, they probably might have some money, but money isn't the thing. The presence is, And of course, again, that's extremely personal. Someone can think in a different way, and that's fine. But that's in most cases, or that's the main reason why I am here. I'm still here.
Yeah. So on this subject of moving and traveling, how do you feel like when you teach in English? How do you feel that your students they see that? Like, I know that we talked about this before, but they see this opportunity of working from home for a different country or in technology. Do you feel that's connected or?
Well, at the moment, they are not adults. They don't really connect or relate that possibilities. I mean, some of them are very clear and very clever since young ages. But in most cases, no. What they say is like, hey, I want to understand this video game. I want to understand this song. I want to know more about this singer or this actress or actor. Those kind of things. But of course, like I said, to learn a new language or education, it is a long-term investment. It takes time. It takes time. And if for those of you who have children, there is no better legacy for your kids than the education you can provide to them. No matter where you are. I don't have children. I don't have nephews or niece or nothing. Just my godson. But that's kind of my advice for you all. That's the most important thing if you have children. Education.
Absolutely. I think the power of education is gigantic and often underappreciated at times. But one thing on sort of a similar topic I wanted to ask you about, I know that you helped to manage a couple of people on the farm. It's pretty exhausting work, I believe, the work that you guys do on the farm. When you have people coming in who sort of don't appreciate that, how do you teach them about the work that they're, going to do, and how do you keep them, I don't know, enthusiastic to keep on working on it? Because it can be a shock to some people who haven't had that kind of hard work they've had to do to start having to do that kind of thing.
That's the most difficult part, and especially because here people are not very stable on their job, so it's very complicated to keep them, and of course to keep them happy, because I don't want, or I wouldn't like to work with someone who is forced or who is working there because that's what he or she has. So what I try to do, or what we try to do as a family, is to show them respect. And when we hire someone new, we used to say like, hey, we should be respectful and we should communicate. And even last week there was a very chaotic day, on the farm, and they were very mean at us, and I did nothing that day. But the next day I was there and I talked and I say, let's try that the challenges from the main door outside and not inside, because otherwise we're going to end crazy. Because Venezuela's daily routine is very hard, very challenging, very demanding. And if we are going to have challenges inside and outside, come on, just sell it and that's it. So that's how we try to encourage them and to work as a team. Because I say I don't live on the farm. The farm is about 30 or 40 minutes from home. We live in the city. I used to tell them like it doesn't make sense or it wouldn't make any sense if you are working extremely hard on the farm and we are not able to sell any chicken or we are not able to sell the different products we have on the farm. It wouldn't make any sense. Or if we sell everything, but we lose chickens and we lose calf or cattle or whatever, it wouldn't make any sense. So that's what we try, to work on teams, but always to communicate anything and to show them respect from both sides. Because when trust and respect is lost, there is nothing else to do.
Perfect. I love your answer. And one of the things just before we wrap, I see that we're close to the hour now, but I just wanted to ask a quick question. You have these leadership kind of challenges in the farm. How can you use your experience when dealing with students? Does it help? Do you have similar challenges, or how do you feel about it?
No, that's different. That's different. I mean, to teach, or I think I am playing different characters in my life. To work on a farm, it is something, and to be a teacher, it is something different. The way I approach my students is different than the way I approach my or the people I work with. And that's different, and it should be different. What I always try to, or what I keep everywhere, is respect and trust. Because, for example, if any of my students says, or we are in a test and they cheat during the test, I get extremely angry. And I don't like lies. I don't like at all. And I keep that when I teach and when I work on the farm as well. But of course, yeah, those are different characters, in fact.
Thank you, Carlos. I think it's interesting that you play these different characters in different scenarios. I think it's important to understand that, because I think there's scenarios I've had with leaders in business and in life who struggle to shift between the roles that they're expected to play, where that is like, acting as a friend versus acting as a boss versus acting as, a partner, things like that. You have to be able to adapt to what the context of what you're doing is to some degree, whilst being true to yourself, of course. Now, as Daniel so correctly said, we have reached the end of the hour. It's always been a pleasure having you on, Carlos. You're always a delight to talk to. Did you have any words of wisdom or any sort of lessons that you've had since we last spoke with you that you'd want to share with us today?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for having me. And if I may say, it's like, let's try to enjoy what we do. Let's do our best and let's stand together as a citizen. Because we try to think that if, for example, if I am in Venezuela, the entire world is like Venezuela, and it isn't. Or if you are in the UK or in Brazil, your world, or you try to think the world, the planet, is just like your country, and it isn't. So we try to appreciate that, to notice that, and to act together as a citizens, as a friends, as humans. That will be, or that way we can make our world a bit better than we found it.
It's amazing. Yeah, it's amazing to hear that, because that's the bias we have, right? We're always looking into our communities, into our bubbles. There are so many bubbles, right? One of them is the country and maybe our perspective of the country, because sometimes we can see different faces of where we live, and we can discover new things when we are open-minded. And it's really nice to hear your words on this, because that's amazing. That's one of the things that I transforming my life is when I started traveling and visiting different places and working with different people from everywhere.
I have noticed that because when we have the video calls with my students and people from different countries, even Spencer and Nancy having my guests as well on those classes, they are amazing and they learn a lot, you know? For example, when Spencer mentioned that he was working on robotics, doing robots, it was like, wow, great. When Nancy talked to them about the turtles, and it was great, amazing. And they didn't know that even in English there were different accents. So there are many ways to learn. And let's, keep our eyes wide open and enjoy our path.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Carlos, and thank you so much for hosting with me today, Daniel. It's been a pleasure, as always. Carlos, we really appreciate your thoughts and everything that you've shared with us and taught us today. Obviously, if you guys have any recommendations of anyone you'd like to listen to or come on in a future Saturday session, we'd really love that. That goes out to everyone listening today. We always like to have recommendations from people of those that they think would bring value to the community and get value from the community. That's obviously always a pleasure. I mean, you have 3 of the team of Founders Voyage in front of you, but from all of us, I'd just like to say to everyone listening, thank you so much for joining us today. We're fortunate to be a part of this community with everyone and the opportunity to bring a cooperative learning experience to everyone each week. Please join us next week at the same time for another inspiring conversation. Any last words from you guys?
Well, thank you so much for having me, and it's very good to hear or to see Iman, Mahib, Matt, Giovanni, Daniel, and you, of course, Spencer. It was a great talk, and thank you. Thank you so much. Feel free to reach out anytime, and let's do our best.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, let's keep in touch. Thanks so much. And it was really a pleasure to be here.
You've just finished another episode of Founders Voyage, the podcast for entrepreneurs by entrepreneurs. The team at Founders Voyage wants to thank you from the bottom of our hearts. We hope you enjoyed your time with us, and if so, please share this with someone else who might enjoy this podcast. You can also support us by leaving a review on Apple Podcasts and Spotify, and by donating to our Patreon. Outro music today is Something for Nothing by Reverend Peyton's Big Damn Band.